Alright, we are back with some more Magic Online Commander. Now, a lot has happened since I last posted. Official Commander Leagues went up, the updated 1v1 ban list is online, and I stopped playing Grenzo online. I found that it just was not good enough for 1v1. You would get out advantage too fast, you couldn't play on people mostly ignoring what you were doing to pursue their own ends like you can in multiplayer. It just was not correct for the format. And also, as a side note, the combos that you need to pull off in order to win with that deck are completely unreasonable and not worth it online. They just take so many clicks and too long. So I'm now playing Grixis Control, or alternatively Grixis Twin. I'm running the Twin package in a Vial Smasher and Crown shell. Now this does happen to be one of the highest performing decks in the format. I swear, I was playing it before tournament results came out. I just thought it was a cool deck. If you've seen this channel before, you know that I'm not really the net decky tier 1 type, but I do like the deck, it's fun to play. I think the Twin package is worth including as sort of a gotcha for games that sort of get out of hand and get out of your control. It's not really something people see coming. You can see, based on my 1v1 queue record here, I've been doing really pretty well with the deck. There's 2 losses on this whole page. There was just one game that I thought was worth showing, so I will pull that up. Alright, so first of all, we are Crom and Vial Smasher against the Gitrog monster. Now this can be a very, very powerful mid-range deck. In paper, it's often a combo-oriented list, although you don't really see that online because, like Grenzo, the combo takes so many clicks to run through to completion. So I'm mostly expecting this to be mid-range, value-oriented, maybe some form of land destruction. Now looking at my hand, this is a fairly slow hand. It's not something that I would automatically keep, but against a slightly slower deck like Gitrog, where it's not a fast aggro deck or a hard control deck that's going to punish me keeping a slower hand and being on the play, I think this is likely fine, but I definitely would not be surprised if someone mulligan. This deck has a fairly low curve, so this is sort of a risky keep. Okay, I'm going to run through these first turns rather fast. So, I play a land, my opponent goes and plays a land. On my turn, I play another land. My opponent's turn, they play a land. And they play Sylvan Library. And this is bad news for a control deck. Sylvan Library is a very powerful card, especially in the Gitrog monster where they're going to be playing the maximum number of fetches that they can. This is going to be filtering their draws really well. And at 30 life, they do have a lot of life to spare to be drawing cards with it. Now, Vial Smasher and Crom is a deck that can put a lot of pressure on my opponent, but this isn't really a hand where I feel comfortable doing that safely. So they're going to have a lot of time to use this. And this is going to stay on the field for most of the game. So, with that said, let's see how that sets the tone. Now, on this turn I could have played Vial Smasher, instead I get Ashiok up and running. I feel like Vial Smasher putting a slight amount of life pressure on them is less important than getting the Planeswalker down and ticking up. And in fact, I pull Oracle off the top, so that's very nice. On my opponent's turn, they library and draw 1 and 2 cards off it. So they've already drawn 2 cards off this, and now they play Lion's Eye Diamond and cycle Tranquil Thicket and cast Imperial Seal. So, Imperial Seal I don't really care about because Ashiok's here to just rip that away. That's not a card they should have cast in this situation. It's possible that they just expected I would minus and pull out this Oracle, but obviously I'm not going to let them have the tutor if I can possibly allow it. But Lion's Eye Diamond is a really weird choice. I don't really know the Gitrog mid-range decks well enough to know if they play this card, but I know for a fact that combo builds do. So I'm very concerned here that this might be a combo-oriented list. Of course, Imperial Seal could see play in either, but it's not the best tutor, so I wouldn't be shocked if it was more for the combo-oriented side. Now I sit on this Cryptic command, and it just plus Ashiok to rip away their tutor target, which I assume was either Exsanguinate or Exploration. I think Exploration was probably what they tutored for here, since they're drawing so many cards off Sylvan Library. But I'm going to keep open the Cryptic command, because they do have Lion's Eye Diamond, they do have a fair amount of mana, and you never really know what terrible thing could happen next. Now, I have the option at times here to blow the Repeal to hit the Sylvan Library and counter it on the way back down. But if you notice how many cards they're drawing here, they have in fact already drawn 2 more cards off it. So they're down to 12 life, having drawn 4 cards of Sylvan Library. So instead I'm going to actually repeal the... kind of skip through that fast. I'm going to repeal the Courser prefix. I want to keep the pressure off Ashiok, I want to drop the Oracle this turn, and I want them to keep from gaining life, because what I see now as my win condition is a very aggressive finish to this game. They're down to 12 life, and I have 2 commanders that can put a lot of life pressure on very quickly. So Crown, of course, can deal chunks of 4, and Vile Smasher can just sit there and deal damage. So my win condition now is damage, not so much control. So my whole goal here is to keep them off balance long enough to sort of surmount this amount of advantage they've gotten off Sylvan Library. And this turn is where I start missing land drops. And this will become a recurring theme this game, so let's count the land drops missed. This is 1. So they vamp Tutor end of turn. Now the opponent keeps no cards, since they're down to 10 life, that's understandable. And they will cast Chainer's Edict. I don't really care about that, I got the Oracle for free, that's fine. Now they cast Ruinous Path. I'm going to Flusterstorm this, because this deck doesn't have that many instants and sorceries that I care about. And Ashiok, they apparently care about it enough to try to kill it. So I'm fine with that. This also incentivizes them, if they want, to pop the Lion's Eye Diamond. I don't really see that happening, but it's possible that they could want to do that. And it also lets me keep Intuition open end of turn. So this seemed like good timing to pop the Flusterstorm, rather than the Izzet Charm or the more flexible Cryptic Command. So I'll Intuition here. And what I'm actually looking to get is something to try to turn my position around. I'm trying to turn myself from my sort of slow position to something where I'm taking the lead. So what I go for is Jace the Mind Sculptor, Factor Fiction, and Mystical Teachings. And I expect them to give me Mystical Teachings since that's the weakest of the bunch, but I think that that's going to keep me drawing counters enough that I can swing my way back into this, after maybe countering and killing the Gitrog a couple times. And they do in fact give me Teachings. Draw Deluge, miss another land drop, plus Ashiok, and miss. So now I've missed 2 land drops. And my opponent is still running with Sylvan Library, and unfortunately, the downside of Ashiok is that I'm giving them new cards to look at every turn, which is not fantastic. End of turn I'm going to Mystical Teachings, and I'm actually going to get Murderous Cut here. And the reason I get Murderous Cut is because I'm low on mana, and I need cards that will not cost a lot of mana to use, but will still keep my opponent off balance. Their win condition is going to be sticking Gitrog Monster and having it stay around, and I cannot allow that to happen. So now I miss my 3rd land drop, in fact, plus Ashiok again, missing again. Opponent cracks a Polluted Delta, going back to 11 life after gaining some life off the Courser. They keep Ashiok down. And then we see a Regrowth cast. And it's going to be Regrowth into, I believe, Ruinous Path? Yes, so they're going to attempt to Ruinous Path to Ashiok. And honestly, at this point, I don't really care that much. I could Cryptic this, but that seems like a vast waste of Cryptic Command. Ashiok isn't really doing much for me, and as I said, it's kind of clearing off their Sylvan Library, which is almost a downside. So they're now wasting Regrowth, a Chainer's Edict, and 2 casts of Ruinous Path to try to kill the Ashiok, so I'm fine with that. Ashiok can die. And I'm glad I did that, because then they attempt to cast Squandered Resources, and this card is kind of a problem. Squandered Resources usually sees play in combo decks, forms of Storm, often in Yggdra's Storm. Sacrifice land, add a mana to your mana pool, basically. And that's very, very powerful with Gitrog, since they'll be playing more lands and drawing more cards every time they sacrifice one. So I cannot let this hit the table. I'm going to Izzet Charm this. Again, they can crack Lion's Eye Diamond, but that will bring them down to no cards in hand, and I should have enough removal to keep them off Gitrog. So if they choose to pay with Lion's Eye Diamond, I'm fine with that. Instead, they let it go, and end of turn, I'm going to Murderous Cut the Courser. Okay, back to my turn. Draw Demonic Tutor. And unfortunately, I don't really have a window to use this right now, because I could Demonic Tutor for a 2-mana counter, for example. I guess that's a reasonable play, but that takes me off a... That doesn't really help. My plan here is to use Demonic Tutor eventually for a land, because if you're keeping track, that is the 4th land drop that I missed. But I just don't really have time to use it. I want to keep open Cryptic Command, I want to keep open Go for the Throat, so it doesn't seem correct to use that there. Now my opponent casts Gitrog, and I could Cryptic this, but Go for the Throat is more specific rather, and I'm fine with letting them draw one card to use the slightly worse removal on it. So that's fine. Now they pass back to me, and I am going to be about to miss a 6th land drop here, but now that I've drawn Spell Pierce, I sort of have a window to lay down Vial Smasher and keep up some interaction at the same time. And Vial Smasher might be my way to pressuring their life total again. They're only at 10 life, so if I can stick Vial Smasher with protection, that will be pretty good. But my opponent has Go for the Throat, and once again I could Spell Pierce here, and they would be forced to drop their hand if they want to keep that. But I'm concerned about that because they can just recast Gitrog, and there's also the possibility that they let it go through, keep the Lion's Eye Diamond, and then have some combo play next turn. And in fact, I'm glad I did that, because, as we see, my opponent casts Yawgmoth's Will. And they have quite the graveyard over here. Let's pop that out. So we can see they have removal, which doesn't matter. They have Courser, they have Squandered Resources, they have a land, which they just played, Oracle, Imperial Seal of Empiric Tutor, a lot of good stuff there. So the Spell Pierce here is going to keep them from getting too crazy with that, hopefully, but one of the first things they cast out of their graveyard is, in fact, Squandered Resources, which is a huge problem because obviously it makes Spell Pierce much worse. So perhaps it would have been the right play to counter the removal onto the Vial Smasher. Although, at this point, with Squandered Resources up and Yawgmoth's Will running, they could just recast the Go for the Throat anyway, so the Spell Pierce would not have done much good there. Now they recast Courser. They have Squandered Resources back, they got a land off of that, so that was a pretty decent draw spell, and Squandered Resources is going to make it that much harder to get back into this game. Alright, so now, finally hit my 5th land drop on turn 10. Which is good for a very specific reason. I'm very, very glad that I managed to hit that, because here's where my opponent tries to re-slam the Gitrog. With all of this, they have a fetch land up, they have Squandered Resources. I cannot let Gitrog and Squandered Resources be on the table at the same time, especially not with this many lands. That would be absolutely horrible. So my opponent drops Gitrog with exactly 2 lands open, and I'm going to Cryptic, countering and bouncing the Squandered Resources, and here's where keeping the Spell Pierce matters a lot, because I can counter this on the way back down. So, here's where they decide to pop the Lion's Eye Diamond, discarding Emerald Medallion, Land, and Maelstrom Pulse to resolve these Squandered Resources. So, having kept the Spell Pierce in hand allowed me to take 3 cards out of their hand, including a Maelstrom Pulse, which will matter a lot later, as well as forcing them to finally break the Lion's Eye Diamond, which constrains their mana somewhat, although now they have Squandered Resources, so not quite that much. But let's see how this plays out now. They'll attack in with Courser of Crufix. They now have no cards in their hand, and I am now free to find the Demonic Tutor, and I will get that counterspell that I said I could have gotten last time. Again, I cannot let Gitrog and Squandered Resources be on the table at the same time. That would be completely unacceptable to me. They're going to Sylvan Library, revealing some cards that I lost track of, and cast Expedition Map. Now, at the time, I wasn't really thinking. I didn't remember that Cabal Coffers was a card that this kind of deck plays, so I did not counter this. I'm not sure if I would have, knowing that they were going to go for Cabal Coffers, which they immediately do. It's kind of risky to do so, because they can still play the Gitrog afterwards, even without the Cabal Coffers, but this does give them absurd amounts of mana to work with. So they now recast Gitrog, I believe, for 9, and I will, of course, Arcane Denial that. And here I present my opponent with a very hard option, which is, do you sacrifice all your lands to recast Gitrog? And in fact, that is exactly what my opponent now does. This is a very risky choice on their part, but I can understand why they want to do it. They need to land this and keep it there in order to get back in this game. And furthermore, they'll sacrifice 3 lands, drawing 3 cards, and we see Crucible of Worlds, Liliana of the Veil, and Reanimate on top. They'll cast the Crucible off the floating mana from Squandered Resources, and my main concern here, having Gitrog on the table, that's fine, I have Damnation, I have Toxic Deluge. The issue that I have is if they keep the Reanimate and allow Gitrog to go to the graveyard once I kill it, because if they can get it back for 1 mana, that's very, very bad for me. Luckily for me, they go ahead and Reanimate the Oracle to get another land out, going down and up to 9 life, and this gives me the perfect time to either Deluge or Damnation. Finally hitting land drops. In earnest now, I'm going to Deluge, keep 4 mana open. I choose the Deluge instead of Damnation because they could have big things at some point. I'm not really sure I think I probably should have Damnation there, save the life for later. Either way, they play Liliana of the Veil, which we knew they had, and choose to discard. I'll drop the Deceiver Exarch. This does not look like a game where Splinter Twin's going to come to play. I don't even have a second red mana on turn 13, so instead what I'm going to do is drop Crom and kill Liliana immediately. Okay, opponent still has Crucible running, opponent still has Sylvan Library running with fetch lands, so I am by no means out of this yet. They're already back up to 5 lands. They Hero's Downfall the Chrome, and drop Elvish Mystic. Sure. Now, this is worth going over. So I now have 9 mana to work with. Chrome costs 7, Vial Smasher costs 5. I could play Chrome and keep up Far, or I could play Vial Smasher and keep up either Far or Away, but not both. But the most damage here is playing Vial Smasher first. That's because I could play Chrome, and if they don't kill it, take them to 1 next turn. But if I play Vial Smasher and they don't kill it, then I can cast Chrome, take them to 4, attack with Chrome, and take them to 0. So the better payoff here is by casting Vial Smasher first, which is what I do. Now I still have the Far Away, either half open, I still have Damnation up. My opponent, having recovered with Cabal Coffers, now casts Terastodon, and this is where this sort of elegant dance comes through. So they target 3 of my lands. If they destroy every one of these, I'll have 9 powers worth of attackers, plus the Vial Smasher, so a total of 11. And they'll have 2 blockers, but they will take me off of Crown. So at this point, they might be fine with that. I can attack them with everything, they'll block 2 of them, take 5, go to 4, and I won't be able to cast Crown next turn. But here I'm going to respond with Away to get them to sacrifice a creature. Now they can't let me get all the tokens from Terastodon, because that will kill them, having lost a blocker. They'll sack the Mystic here, and choose not to blow up the lands. Now this does let me recast Crown. And casting Crown here is still enough to kill them, because I can cast it, get the trigger off Vial Smasher, and they can't block Crown, so that would take a total of 9. So because of that, because I prevented them from killing my lands, and thus allowing me to get Crown next turn, they're forced to actually blow up more of their own lands just to kill Vial Smasher in order to not die. So they sack 3 lands here. I think they only needed to sack 2. I think that was a mistake, to putrefy the Vial Smasher. Now I draw Condescend, and they're on few enough lands that Condescend can actually do some work because of that play earlier. So I'm going to cast Vial Smasher, keep the 2 mana open as a Force Spike, and drop them to 2 life. And here's where I think they make their only real misplay of the game besides sacking that extra land last time. Crown can of course attack them for 4 damage and they'll die. So they need to answer it right now. And what my opponent has is a very soft answer. It's actually life gain in the form of Nature's Claim. They should have casted their Nature's Claim on their turn when I was tapped out and didn't draw that extra card, and that's always true. If you have something that you're going to absolutely do against a control deck no matter what, you should cast it on your turn before they untap, before they draw a card. Instead, he waits until my turn to cast Nature's Claim, and that is an issue because I have Condescend for exactly 8, and as you can see, they have 1, 2, 3, plus 4 mana open with Squandered Resources. They have 7 mana left, and I can Condescend for 8, taking them off Nature's Claim, and finally winning this crazy game. Whew. So, to reiterate, Sylvan Library is an incredibly powerful card. They drew a total of, I believe, either 4 or 5 cards off it over the course of the game and filtered a lot with the fetches, but it took them down to somewhere between 9 and 11 life because of the course of Crufix. They jumped around in that area, and that's incredibly dangerous to do against Crom and Vial Smasher. And once I finally started hitting land drops, I was free to put pressure on while still holding up interaction, and finally take over this game. I really liked this game. It was incredibly good. You'll notice from my mana base that this is not a fully optimized Crom and Vial Smasher list. This is just what I was willing to put money into at the moment. So it has a few fetches, the shocks, but only one of the duels, Badlands, since it's pretty cheap. But yeah, so I might show more with this deck, and I might do a league or 2. I tried them in the past and got kind of curb stomped. The 1v1 meta is absolutely brutal, which is honestly really fun. I like that the games can be really interactive and entertaining. Unfortunately, the non-pay-to-play 1v1 queues are not quite the same level of competition, but this game was good enough that I felt that it was worth posting. So, hope you enjoyed, and have a good night.